Must accept the grim reality that Putin will continue to tighten the vice. And if you go by the sheer size and firepower of Vladimir Putin's war machine, the odds have always been heavily against Ukrainian armed forces.
Good afternoon and welcome to another special programme due to the war in Ukraine. As Freedom Square in the eastern city of Kharkiv was destroyed by Russian attacks, an enormous column of Russian forces around 30 miles long is approaching the capital, Kyiv. Boris Johnson is touring neighbouring countries and said the odds were heavily against Ukraine, but claimed Putin was making a colossal mistake and that he would fail. However, calls for a NATO no-fly zone have been firmly rejected, to the dismay of many Ukrainians.
You're talking about more sanctions, Prime Minister, but Roman Abramovich is not sanctioned. He's in London. His children are not in the bombardments. His children are there in London. Putin's children are in Netherlands, in Germany, in mansions. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run. Well, this is what is happening, Prime Minister.
Well, thank you.
Until now, Russia has not fully used its overwhelming advantage in military manpower and resources over Ukraine. But that seems to be changing. The vast convoy of Russian military vehicles heading to Kyiv significantly escalates the threat to the capital and the risk that it will be cut off from food supplies. Cameras have also recorded a missile strike on the administrative building in the second city of Kharkiv. There are also reports emerging that at least 70 Ukrainian soldiers were killed in Russian shelling in Okhtyrka in the Sumy region. Fatima Manji has the latest.
The moment a Russian missile hits, causing an explosion in the centre of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. The target, a local government building, its exterior still standing, the inside reduced to rubble, as this footage released by Ukraine's state emergency services shows. Perhaps this place was chosen for the symbolism of its location as much as anything else. It stands in the heart of Kharkiv's Freedom Square. But Ukrainian officials say residential areas have been pounded by Russian rockets too.
People are under the ruins. We pulled out the bodies of at least 6 people and around 20 people are injured.
As the missiles rain down, for some, everyday life has moved underground. This is a maternity ward in a bomb shelter. It appears eerily calm. The soundtrack is a normal newborn wail. And yet, what fears these new mothers must be living in. Others are finding shelter where they can. Ekaterina Babenko and her family have been hiding out in a small basement at a friend's house.
It's already the 5th day we're here in the basement. We are very worried and it's very scary. We have small children, elderly people, and frankly, it's very frightening.
Overnight, fires lit up the sky close to Kiev, the apparent aftermath of a strike on a military base. The men driving past say it's just been hit and the situation is nuts. This morning, Ukraine's capital seemingly had checkpoints and armed soldiers at every corner. And no wonder. These satellite images from a space tech firm appear to show a 40-mile-long Russian convoy heading in the direction of Kiev. Russia denies targeting civilian areas, though few were willing to listen to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov addressing a UN meeting in Geneva this morning, with British and French diplomats staging a walkout.
Western countries should stop creating military installations in the territory of the states which early were part of the Soviet Union and which currently are not members of NATO. That should also include the usage of their infrastructure from conducting any military activities. Ukraine still retained all Soviet nuclear technologies and means of delivery of such weapons. We cannot help reacting to such a military danger.
In Moscow, fears over sanctions are starting to show, with queues of people trying to withdraw money at cash points. At Ukraine's border with Romania, a trail of people continued to flee the military assault, prams and possessions in tow. Only women and children climbed aboard this bus. Some intend to head as far as Germany. Many said crossing the border has become physically easier, though perhaps not emotionally, with no idea of when they might be able to return.
Well, while the invasion is only 6 days old, the number of people thought to have fled west out of the country is already reported to have exceeded 520,000. Matt is in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv and joins us now from the train station where thousands are desperately trying to escape to Poland. Matt.
Well, Christian, this is indeed the train station. The bus station is right next door. But as you can tell from those blue tents, it's become... Hi there. So a bit busy at the moment. As you can tell from the tents, it's become a makeshift refugee camp. Everyone who wants to leave this country at the moment, and you mentioned the figure of just over 500,000, I think the latest update is 660,000, have to come through this place. They try and get onto trains to Poland or buses to Poland. And it's not just Ukrainians. This is the United Nations of displacement, full of citizens, not of nowhere, but of somewhere, but often not here. So a group of Indian medical students from the city of Kharkiv on their way back to India, stuck here for days. A group of Mongolian students on their way back to Mongolia, have no idea how to get there. Lebanese over there. It's just an extraordinary glimpse of what awaits Europe or perhaps the wider world, because this number of 660,000 refugees so far, that is bound to increase as the Russians step up their military campaign on big cities like Kyiv and Kharkiv, because there are 44 million people in this country, including all these foreigners, many of whom will want to get out. And then the extraordinary sort of personal stories. Let's have a look at this for a minute. The extraordinary personal stories. There was a guy over there who's gone now called Dmitry. He's an IT specialist. Now he's wearing a brand new uniform. He's just dropped off his 68-year-old mother, who's got diabetes, hoping that she'll get on a train to Poland. And he's going the other way, back to the front line in order to fight the Russians. And he used language to describe what he's about to do that we can't really broadcast here on the lunchtime television. But these people are highly motivated. What sustains them, what feeds their resilience, is not just the food that's being cooked over there right now in these makeshift soup kitchens, but also their growing hatred of the Russian invader. And that's what this is really about. This is about self-determination. It is about resilience. It is about dignity. And they are deeply frustrated that they're not getting enough military help, especially from the air, from NATO. And this is going to be a huge dilemma for the rest of Europe and indeed for NATO, when you've got these columns of Russian tanks heading towards the capital and other cities, right? Hundreds, thousands of them ready to pulverize this place, of which we've just seen the beginning in recent days. Then the question for NATO will be, how do we intervene without causing a wider conflict? That is the big question on everyone's mind here, apart from getting on the next train or the next bus to Poland, Hungary or Slovakia. Back to you, Krish.
Thanks, Matt, and more from Matt tonight at 7. Now, a short while ago, I spoke to Ukraine's youngest ever MP, Sviatoslav Yurash, who's in Kyiv, the capital, and has armed himself with an AK-47. He began by telling me exactly where he is and what the situation is.
I'm one of the government buildings. We have defenses prepared right now. So yesterday I was in the south of Kyiv, going to the guys there. One of my assistants there is leading defense efforts there. And 2 days before I was traveling to the north, where there were skirmishes of fighting. And again, they have lots of needs of various sorts. Today I'll be traveling to the north as well, but also be helping out with the efforts here.
This Russian column is clearly approaching Kyiv. It is not clear what they will do. Do you believe, are you expecting them to try and surround the city and besiege it?
We know exactly what it's going to do. We have seen these columns attack Ukrainian towns throughout the last 5 days, in the north, in the east, in the south of Ukraine. So we have no illusions this column will come around and give out candy. The point is that this column is full of weapons, rockets, grenades, soldiers, and as far as fighting, it's going to be a fight. Again, our citizens are not going to give up our capital. So that's why we give everybody who wants means to defend their city, And we will organize and bring together all the sides of Ukrainian society to showcase to the world that we want our nation free and independent.
And do you believe you can keep supply lines open to Kyiv?
We have kept them open from the west and the south. from what I can see. And basically, the reality is that we don't really have a problem of keeping them open. They are landing airborne there, but we keep clearing them out, from what you can see.
We've seen the British Prime Minister in the Baltic states today and in Poland talking about the help that he wants the world to send more of. What do you need? What do you want right now?
Well, we need everything. The point here is that nothing is enough. Fighting one of the biggest world's armies is not exactly cakewalk. So the point is nothing is enough. I mean, we're getting supplies, food, sandbags, weapons of various kinds. And again, that gives us a fighting chance. We need to truly have some instruments to throw at the enemy coming at us. So we thank you for all the support we've been getting from you so far, but the more the merrier, as they say.
And do you understand why all the NATO countries are being very clear that NATO cannot join this war, that this is ultimately Ukraine's war?
This is a global conflict by any measurement that you look at it. The point here is we're receiving lots of weapons support from NATO countries. Again, and we are actually receiving lots of foreign volunteers coming in. We have set up a procedure for which a lot of those volunteers can join the Ukrainian defense efforts and try and help us in this fight. The point here is that NATO countries are helping us in many ways. That way, that is direct way, would be welcome, but I understand the limitations. But the reality is, again, every little bit helps.
And do you think there is any difference between direct help from NATO and the no-fly zone? Some people are still talking about the no-fly zone as if it would not involve, effectively, NATO going to war with Russia. What's your opinion on this?
Russia is obviously looking at the data as well as you are, as well as we are, and understands that for it to go to war with NATO is madness. So the point here is that no-fly zone is a humanitarian measure that would stop the indiscriminate bombing of Ukrainian civilians, the Ukrainian cities, and landing airborne in various parts of Ukraine. That is going to be a game changer. So obviously we demand no-fly zone because that's the only way to keep the Russians at least to the front line and keep them from throwing their airborne troops behind the lines or trying to bomb our cities indiscriminately. The point is, I don't know how many more videos of people dead and civilian buildings blown up that the West needs to see to understand that no-fly zone is what Ukraine needs to showcase that the world is doing that final effort to keep the Russians from killing our people.
And when European politicians say a no-fly zone would mean a war with Russia, why are they wrong?
Russia is a country that understands, as it was shown many times over, one thing and one thing only. And therefore, the point is imposition of no-fly zone is something that Russia would have to abide because it cannot truly compete with Europe or the West in any way, be it military or economic or any other way. It has a hard time trying to take over us, not to mention the might of the Western countries.
Mr. Juresh, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Take care. Well, Boris Johnson has said the UK stands ready to take in refugees fleeing the Russian advance and said that number could reach 200,000. The Prime Minister was speaking in the last hour in Warsaw alongside his Polish counterpart. He said President Putin had fatally underestimated the resolve of the Ukrainian people and was using barbaric tactics to target civilians. Our political correspondent Liz Bates reports.
Arriving in Poland this morning, the Prime Minister hoping this is one leg of the journey back to peace in Ukraine. Shoulder to shoulder with the Polish Prime Minister was the image that was supposed to be projected to the world. Instead, during a later speech, he was confronted by a Ukrainian anti-corruption activist who has made it out of the conflict and wants answers.
You're coming to Poland. You're not coming to Kyiv, Prime Minister. You're not coming to Lviv. Because you are afraid, because NATO is not willing to defend, because NATO is afraid of World War III, but it is already started. And these are Ukrainian children who are there taking the hit. You're talking about more sanctions, Prime Minister, but Roman Abramovich is not sanctioned. He's in London. His children are not in the bombardments. His children are there in London. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run.
Well,
This is what is happening, Prime Minister.
as I said to you earlier on, the UK was the first European country to offer military assistance, also doing everything we can to tighten the economic noose around the Putin regime, and we were amongst the very first to put that package together. And I have to tell you, I think that it will work.
After that emotional exchange, the Prime Minister will continue his visit in the region this afternoon to Estonia to meet British troops there to reinforce NATO forces and to push the case for further sanctions. At the centre of it all, the Ukrainian president, who addressed EU leaders remotely this morning. The US and NATO have rejected his latest request for a no-fly zone amid fears over where it could lead, something President Biden tried to play down last night.
Mr. President, should Americans be worried about nuclear war?
No.
But more military support is coming from the Australian Prime Minister.
We're talking missiles, we're talking ammunition, we're talking supporting them in their defence of their own homeland in Ukraine, and we'll be doing that in partnership with NATO. I'm not going to go into the specifics of that because I don't plan to give the Russian government a heads up about what's coming their way, but I can assure them it's coming your way.
As the ruble hits historic lows, signs that sanctions are taking effect. And back in Westminster, new laws to clamp down on dirty foreign money are being rushed through. Critics say, though, the government still hasn't gone far enough in its help for Ukrainian refugees. The Home Office say there are security concerns, but they're working on it. So yes, as you just heard, something that the government has been under a lot of pressure over is its stance on Ukrainian refugees. Now, Priti Patel said yesterday that the UK would accept Ukrainians with close family members in the country. That was criticised because some people said that the definition of close family was too strict. Well, what we've heard today is that that definition is going to be extended. We also hear from Number 10 that there will be a new sponsorship route. And the Prime Minister was asked about this earlier today and said that could mean that the UK could take a much higher number of Ukrainians.
What we're going to do is we're extending the family scheme so that actually very considerable numbers would be eligible. As I set out earlier, you could be talking about a couple of 100,000, maybe more. Additionally, we're going to have a...
Now, what the Home Office say is that they're already doing a lot on this, but there are security concerns around making the type of blanket offer that we've seen from the EU. But it's something that they're working on, and we will hear more about this later today from Priti Patel. She'll be making a statement to the House of Commons.
Liz Bates. Well, the US banker and anti-corruption campaigner Bill Browder made his fortune in Russia before calling for corrupt individuals to face sanctions. His lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, was allegedly murdered in prison by the Russian authorities. Mr. Browder joins us now from central London. We saw that very angry and understandably emotional plea from a Ukrainian journalist to Boris Johnson to do more, to target individuals, to take away all those amazing mansions in London that they own. How much more could Britain do?
A lot more. Britain is the money laundering capital of the world when it comes to Russian oligarch money. Putin holds his money with these Russian oligarchs. And now we have an opportunity to hit way above our weight and hit these people hard and to do what that woman was asking for, which is to seize the assets of these oligarchs. This is what Putin cares about. He cares about his money and he cares about the oligarchs' money. We've made a lot of bold statements about it, but we haven't actually seized any mansions or assets. It needs to start happening. It needs to start happening right away. And Putin needs to see that every soldier that goes into Ukraine ends up with money being frozen offshore. This is his Achilles heel. This is how we can fight back right here, right now, and we should be doing it.
Now, various politicians have been hinting, well, they've got very powerful lawyers, the oligarchs. It's very difficult to do this. Is it?
No, it's not very difficult to do it. You can stick an oligarch on the sanctions list. There's a thing called the Magnitsky Act, which I was involved in getting passed here, which says that you can sanction foreigners based on corruption or human rights abuse. There's many oligarchs where there's absolute open information about them being involved in corruption. They could be put on the sanctions list today and their assets would be frozen. I don't know what the delay is, but every day that we delay It's just one more time that Putin thinks that he can get away with what he's doing.
Now, you know the financial and investment system in Moscow very well. What do you think the impact of the existing sanctions is? Is Russia at all crippled?
Yes, there's no question. So the current sanctions that have been imposed freeze the assets of the central bank, make it impossible for most commercial banks to do business. The ruble, as a result, has crashed. The stock market has crashed. Prices are going to go up dramatically. People can't get access to their accounts. They can't get access to the ATMs. But I should point out that this is affecting the average person. Well, Putin and his oligarchs are still sitting pretty. And our beef is not with the average Russian. Our beef is with Putin and the oligarchs. And so, yes, it's a good thing to do because at this point, we have to do everything in our power economically to try to raise the cost of this exercise to Putin. But we should be doing it as efficiently as possible. And the most important thing is to go after his personal financial interests.
Do all these sanctions also end up hurting us?
Well, the sanctions that don't hurt us are going after the oligarchs. The sanctions that do hurt us are, cutting off the entire Russian economy. There are many companies that won't be doing business with Russia because of these broad brush sanctions. But the ones that don't hurt are the targeted sanctions against the oligarchs.
And I mean, again, in terms of the importance of property, how important is it?
Well, property is important. Bank accounts are important. Investments in companies are important. Private planes are important. If you look at the oligarchs, they have a whole portfolio of interests, and we should be going after all of those interests because that portfolio of interests also is looking after Putin's portfolio of interests, and it's extremely important. It's the most important thing. And just to put it in some perspective for you, so the moment we started talking about going after oligarchs, Putin threatens nuclear war. Now, nobody wants to go to nuclear war with him, but you can understand that that's his pressure point. And we can either tiptoe around his pressure point, or we can hit him with his pressure point. And it just seems to me that he needs to understand that he can't just go into Ukraine and kill innocent people as he's doing unpunished. There has to be a real cost to this, and the cost has to be personal.
And just finally, I mean, do you think those people we call oligarchs do actually have power over Russia and over Putin, which is kind of the definition of oligarch?
Well, I think it's actually different. I don't think they have power over Putin. I think they look after Putin's money. So if we're trying to get to Putin, these are proxies, these are nominees, these are trustees for Vladimir Putin. And for that reason, not because we're expecting them to overthrow him, but because they look after his money. And when you sanction them, you sanction him.
We must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has just finished addressing the European Parliament in Brussels via video link from Ukraine. Let's hear a little of what he said.
We are fighting just for our land and for our freedom. Despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked, nobody is going to enter and intervene with our freedom and country. And believe you me, every square up today, no matter what it's called, it's going to be called, as today, Freedom Square in every city of our country. Nobody is going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians. We have a desire to see our children alive. I think it's a fair one.
Standing ovation in the European Parliament. We're back at 7 tonight. Until then, that's Channel 4 News. Good afternoon.